It was supposed to be a no-news event, a friendly crowd watching Stephen Harper bat away softball questions from a non-journalist, Ian Black of the BC Board of Trade. Totally safe, right?
I'd like to...
Wrong. Two protesters got right next to Harper.
I'd like to take a minute and have some folks removed from the stage.
The Mounties only stepped in after the two got on stage. Harper made light of it.
It wouldn't be BC without it.
There you are. A warm British Columbia welcome.
The audience applauded, but still, two climate change activists dressed as hotel staff had walked right past RCMP security. One of them, Sean Devlin from Guelph, Ontario, went down with a thud, and he was hustled off backstage. But he should have been well known to the Mounties. He is a veteran activist on climate change, but he says he was never screened before today's protest and was only manhandled after it.
I'm actually a comedian by trade, and I have had a few harsh receptions on stage, but I think that was the harshest. They threw me right off stage, down some stairs, and then threw me into the kitchen and held me on the ground, and I was arrested and released. There haven't been any charges.
Still, there is no way protesters should have got that close to Harper, not according to this video promoting the RCMP's VIP protection service as state-of-the-art. But they weren't running such a tight ship today and said in a rueful statement that we are reviewing the details. Appropriate action will be taken. Otherwise, both the RCMP and the PMO say they cannot comment on security matters. But you can bet there's plenty of comment behind the scenes. After all, just putting on an apron is not supposed to be enough to get you past the Mounties, Peter.
Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Newsman.
This is a special third edition of the conservative nightmare that is called fascist government in Canada on Video Radio.
Welcome to Radio Free Canada. A special shout out to our dear leader, Mr. Stephen Harper, whose year hasn't started out very well.
How did it feel with that sign of truth behind you in Vancouver? Okay, we are urging more people to bring Stop Harper signs wherever Harper goes. However, Harper is not in Canada when we're recording this.
Yes, he's made a special trip to his best buddy, Benjamin Netanyahu.
So, Enrage Vision brings you a quick couple clips back to back. Check this out.
Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper is in Israel on a 4-day visit. Upon arrival in Jerusalem, Al-Quds, he was hailed as a great ally of Tel Aviv.
So the people of Israel and I deeply appreciate your friendship and the friendship of the people of Canada to us.
Well, this is Harper's first official visit to Israel. Bilateral issues, Iran, the ongoing conflict in Syria, and the so-called Middle East peace process will be discussed between the two sides. Harper will also address the Knesset and travel to Ramallah for talks with acting Palestinian Authority Chief Mahmoud Abbas. Canada was one of the few countries that opposed a successful Palestinian bid for upgraded status at the United Nations in 2012. Well, let's speak to Joshua Blakeney, our correspondent in Calgary, who joins us via Skype. Now, Joshua, Stephen Harper, the most Zionist, pro-Zionist Prime Minister in Canada's recent history, of course. Tell us a bit more. I understand his visit to Israel has raised a lot of eyebrows in Canada as well.
Yes, increasingly Canadians are beginning to ask, why is Canada's government elevating the national interests of a foreign extraneous entity, namely the Zionist entity of Israel, while subordinating the national interests of Canada? Harper arrived in Israel, and one of the headlines in a Hebrew newspaper in Israel was "Our Man in North America" on the front page of the Israeli newspaper. And for once, the Israeli press was telling the truth, because Stephen Harper is better viewed as being Israel's ambassador to Canada rather than being the Canadian Prime Minister elected by the Canadian people for the Canadian people. And obviously Canada's government is intent upon securing the interests of Israel, even if that goes against the national interests of this country. One quintessential case study would be Canada's stance towards Iran. Here you have a country of more than 70 million people, which Canadian companies should be trading with, a country which Canada should be having cordial relations with, and Canada has the most aggressive sanctions regime placed upon that country, which jeopardizes Canada's trade interests, all based on the bizarre assertions, unfounded assertions of the Israeli regime vis-a-vis Iran's peaceful civilian nuclear program. Domestically, Canada
place today, Stephen Harper getting standing ovations from the vast number of members in the Knesset, but in mid-speech, he was heckled by two Arab-Israeli politicians who then walked out. Take a look at an extended clip of exactly what happened.
Some openly call Israel an apartheid state. Now think about that statement. Think about the twisted logic and outright malice behind that. A state based on freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. Founded so that Jews can flourish as Jews and seek shelter from the shadow of the worst racist experiment in history. That is condemned, and it is condemned in language, in the masked language of anti-racism. Friends, that is nothing short.
Okay, so what do you think?
Well, we have to ask ourselves how he's representing Canada's interests over in Israel.
What interests? I mean, these guys are in the middle of the trade zone of the entire world. Us sending stuff over there is ludicrous because, you know, it costs like $1 billion to send a plant.
Well, you know, the real reason he's over there is for politicking. It's to get a hold of the Canadian Jewish vote.
I thought it was birds.
Well, that was the excuse he went. But he also managed to tick off a couple members of the Israeli parliament as well. They stormed out there on him. So he actually set history.
The Harper Conservatives have also denoted themselves here at home. CSIS, okay?
The guy who was supposed to be in charge of CSIS has a side job, it seems.
Check this out.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Kayla Rivara in Baltimore, and welcome to this latest edition of the Engler Report. Now joining us is Eve Engler. Eve is a Canadian commentator and author. Thank you for joining us, Eve. Recently, former Minister Chuck Strahl, who's now the top spy watchdog, was found to have a conflict of interest with the Northern Gateway issue. Could you explain?
Yeah, it's come to light in the last couple of days that Chuck Strahl, who was a former conservative Aboriginal Affairs Minister and a couple of different other ministry positions at different periods, he was appointed by Stephen Harper personally to head up the Security Intelligence Review Committee, which oversees the CSIS, the internal spy agency. And Chuck Strahl and CSIS, it's come to light a couple weeks ago that they've been spying on opponents of the Northern Gateway pipeline project and passing that information to Enbridge. And now what's come to light as the person overseeing CSIS, Chuck Strahl, the former conservative minister, has also been lobbying for Enbridge for the last 2 years. He just signed the official lobby registry in BC. Vancouver Observer online newspapers found that he's actually been lobbying for the company since at least the end of 2011. So this is a pretty serious conflict of interest. This is a serious embarrassment, but it just speaks to how close the Conservatives are, how tied in they are with the oil companies in the tar sands, but also the pipeline company like Enbridge trying to build this $8 billion tar sands pipeline.
Eve Engler, thank you so much for joining us.
Right here, we're trying to think up a really good name for CSIS. So if you have an idea, join us on Facebook at Radio Free Canada. I'm Darren Howard.
I'm Robert Nisbet.
Make sure you email him lots. He has so much time on his hands while, you know, he's not producing this show. We saw in the XL food crisis right here that, what is it, 1/2 of Canadian meat goes through one processing plant in Alberta?
And it's not being caught by the people we put in charge to inspect the meat.
As a matter of fact, all safety inspections in Canada have taken a drastic drop underneath the fascist Harper regime.
well, you know, we got to make those cuts so we can make more arms deals to Israel.
Check this out.
Adequate. The U.S. government has put that label on Canada's food safety system. It's the lowest of 3 possible ratings and comes after a U.S. audit of how Canadian meat is handled. During the course of the audit, inspectors didn't just look at where red meat is slaughtered, but also where meat and eggs are processed. And some of what they discovered might make your skin crawl. Flaking paint and rust on overhead pipes, grease spots on conveyor belts, and dusty trays under ventilators. All of it a risk to the meat we eat. The audit happened in late 2012 after the XL beef recall, the largest meat recall in Canadian history. 18 people became sick with E. coli. U.S. border inspectors were the first to figure out the meat was contaminated. Since then, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has put together a plan to fix the situation, adding 750 inspectors and more layers of oversight. In a statement, the Minister of Health says, in part, Canada has one of the healthiest and safest food systems in the world, and we aim to keep it that way.
Our food safety system falls in ranking to the barest minimal passing grade to export to the U.S., and somehow this government finds something to cheer about.
Beyond consumer safety concerns, the new rating could slow down trade. Canadian meat will be subject to more audits and inspections at the border, a price Canada will have to pay until our food safety system meets American standards.
You see, this is why it's one of my favorite shows.
I always love to bash the Conservative government.
And anytime I get to say fascist Conservative government, and you know I'm speaking the truth, it's a good day. So make sure you join us. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
It's Sundays downtown at City Park where we record video radio. And soon we're going to be bringing you music, solutions,
and some real inspiring words.
So make sure you check that out. And if you have a chance, come down and join us. This is Video Radio, Radio Free Canada.
Well, that was an excellent instant macaroni-style dinner, hon. Delish.
Glad you liked it. How about you, kids?
We have it every other night.
Looking for a board game that will distract your kids from how bad things are?
Turn those frowns upside down. Who wants to play Pandas and Pipelines?
Yay!
Pandas and Pipelines. It's the new game that brings your family together while the economy and the environment fall apart.
I rolled a 6, I landed on a pipeline, I get a panda. You always get the panda. I landed in jail. Can I roll to get out?
No, not for mandatory 3 turns. Come on, 7. I got a panda.
That'll be $10 million.
Oh, I'll have to close a daycare.
Wait, I'm confused. We don't keep the pandas?
No. Cuddly panda.
It says I won't be eligible for old age security.
You won't. But look, a panda. Love this game.
It's fun that you don't have a job, Dad.
Who wants margarine sandwiches?
Yay!
Pandas and Pipelines. It's confusing as hell. But look, a panda from Harper Brothers. It's Distractulous.
This was not a ruling on the legality of prostitution. It was a ruling on whether the restrictions imposed by Parliament on prostitution, which is legal in Canada, are endangering the safety of sex workers. The justices unanimously found they are. They struck down the prohibition on keeping a brothel, making a living from prostitution, and on street soliciting. The plaintiffs argue that means they'll be able to take the security precautions needed for a safe working environment.
This is the first time in Canadian history that sex workers are truly persons. We are truly citizens of this country. And now we can work in our legal occupation in a legal manner.
But the laws remain in place for now. The justices have given Parliament a year to draft new laws to impose limits on what they called the community disruption of prostitution without endangering sex workers. But what should replace these laws? One group argues Parliament should follow what's called the Nordic model.
The government would put into place social and economic supports to women to prevent us from being vulnerable to the procurers and the pimps and the brothel keepers.
While Parliament decides, the Chief Justice admitted that sex workers will continue to be at risk in Canada. Shihab Ratansi, Al Jazeera.